buses and wanted to be consistent on that. So we'll have them back at a future meeting, but that concludes our special presentations tonight, Madam President.
Thank you, Dr. Gist. We got a lot of cool stuff. As you can see, I was very excited to look in here. Graphic design, spice mixes, cookies, an advertisement for Hell's Kitchen. So it's very cool. And I was so excited about that. We did not say the pledge, so if you'll stand and join me in the pledge.
Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So, not as exciting as cookies or as exciting as cookies. We're getting 2 new board members sworn in this evening for the election districts number 2 and number 5. So I will now read a statement concerning the election of a board member to represent school board election district number 2. There have been presented to the Board of Education of Independent School District Number 1 of Tulsa County, Oklahoma, the results of the election for a school board member as shown by the official returns furnished by the Tulsa County Election Board. Said Board of Education finds and declares of record that said election was conducted by the officers designated in the proclamation and notice of such election, with all vacancies filled according to law and in all respects as required by law, that said election was conducted by ballot in the form prescribed, that the polls were opened at 7 a.m. and remained open continuously until the polls closed at 7 p.m. on the 12th day of February 2019. The hours designated in said proclamation and notice of election, and that the votes cast by the fully qualified electors were as follows: Hanya Wester, 282 votes, and Gary Copper, 92 votes. Accordingly, I hereby state that Hanya Wester has been elected to the office of Board Election District Number 2 to fulfill the unexpired term of former board member. Mr. Wade will administer the oath of office to Ms. Wester. So if you all want to come to the front. Congratulations, Ms. Wester. Maybe we should have you administer the oath to Mr. Hosmer and see if he can do it in Spanish back. I'm kidding. Do you have any remarks that you'd like to make?
You know, I truly believe that hard work really has brought me here. But it was absolutely impressive and amazing to get a chance to reconnect with a lot of the families that I served for so many years and get a chance to actually talk with them about the status of the district and the status of our education system. So I'm very thankful that they went out and voted.
Wonderful. We will move on to Dr. Hosmer. At the special meeting of the board on February 4th, I think most of you know, the board appointed Mr. Hosmer to fill the vacant seat in Board Election District 5 to serve the unexpired term of the former board member. I'm pleased to ask Mr. Wade to administer the oath of office to the newly appointed member representing District 5. Mr. Wade. Congratulations, Dr. Hosmer. We're so happy to have you and Ms. Wester join us. Do you have any remarks you'd like to make?
Briefly, I'm honored and flattered that the board selected me to fill out the unexpired remainder of the term for District 5. I'm honored to serve the families and children of District 5, but also in working with my colleagues on the board here to work with Superintendent Gist to advance TPS and education across our city. So I'm delighted to be here and looking forward to learning and serving this community.
Wonderful. So from there, we will move to our consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on the consent agenda? I'll call for the vote. Ms. Fate?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. That moves us to our action agenda, and we have 4 items to consider this evening on our action agenda items, excuse me. I'm just double checking, okay. So we'll start with F1, and that recommendation is to enter into an agreement with School Kit Group to assist in the development of supporting content for core knowledge, language arts, college and career aligned instructional practices and adult learning aligned to core knowledge, language arts to support implementation of Tulsa Way for Teaching and Learning, February 20th, 2019 through June 30th, 2019, and the cost is not to exceed $245,000. And rather than read the rationale, I think it might be more helpful if either board members have questions or we just have a staff member speak to this. I think I'd like to get a motion on the table first. Is there a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
And with that, we'll go into discussion. I want to have Mr. Fletcher speak to it.
So as part of our work, we've brought before the board, I think, an update on what we're doing with creating and developing the Tulsa Way for Teaching and Learning. As part of that, we have enlisted the support of School Kit, an organization that has helped districts and state departments across the country build out models that are modules that align to English language arts, mathematics, that support both teacher and student instruction and the aligned professional development, and a system that really takes and honors teachers' voice, which is what we've been trying to do, and they'll support us in doing that work. The initial phase of the work is just to gain an understanding of what our teachers want and need to support us in the development of that alongside of teachers, and then also to support us with the professional development for our instructional mentors and coaches that we'll support throughout the summer.
Any questions from board members on this item? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Ms. Wester?
Aye.
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 Aye. Item F2 is we'll receive bids for the purchase of $22,500,000 combined purpose general obligation bonds, Series 2019A, and motion to vote to award said bonds to the lowest bidder complying with the notice of sale and instructions to bidders. Is there a motion on F2?
Move approval.
Second.
So this action item we'll need to accept the bonds, and I think Mr. Hudgens is going to present those.
Yes. Thank you, President Schreiber and board members. I had one thing to add. The lowest bidder, I wanted to add that name is BNY Mellon Capital Markets. And we received 9 bids today for this $22.5 million. There was the lowest bid at 1.84%. And this is lower than the last bond that we sold in August. So the bond costs have gone down, which is good. And so we'll be able to do more things with our bond costs. So are there any questions on any of this?
These bonds are from our last package, correct?
Yeah.
From the 20,
It's from the 2015.
15.
And to give you an idea, this puts us about 64% of the 415 million that we've authorized from the voters. So there's several things that haven't been done, but we've only received, this is about 64%.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. I think the motion is really to award the sale of the bonds to the BNY Mellon Capital Market. So do we need to have the previous motion withdrawn?
I don't think so, Madam President. I think that the rationale set out that the action item would be accepting the lowest rate of
Okay.
interest bid to purchase the bonds. So I feel like that was included in the motion that was
Okay.
made.
Excellent. So with no further questions, I will call for the vote. Ms. Wester?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And that moves us to item F3, and that is consider and vote on a resolution providing for the issuance of general obligation bonds in the sum of $22,500,000 by the school district, authorized in election duly called and held for such purpose, March 3rd, 2015, designating the bonds as combined purpose general obligation bonds, Series 2019A, providing for registration thereof, providing for levy of an annual tax for the payment of principal and interest on the same, and fixing other details on the issue.
Move to approve.
Second?
Any questions on this item? Discussion? Okay. I never want to let one of these bond issuances go by without acknowledging the voters of Tulsa who generously approved this with over 60% and keep our schools in great order and allow us to have safety and spaces at the schools that we really need. And they just come and bring it every time and come with the votes, and it's just something that I never want to take for granted. So thank you, everybody that's out there tonight, that's here, and all the voters that are watching on Facebook Live. And with that, I'll call for the vote. Ms. Fate?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Now we are going to move to item F4, and I'll read the recommendation, and we'll get a motion on the table, and then we'll call for the speakers and discussion among the board. So F4 is a recommendation to approve the recommendation of the North Tulsa Task Force to create a single neighborhood middle school to be called Monroe Demonstration Academy, effective July 1, 2019, that will serve all 6th through 8th grade students living in the McLean feeder pattern beginning in the 2019-2020 school year. Specifically, if approved, this recommendation will, as of July 1, 2019, change the Monroe Demonstration Academy, Site 563, from a magnet school to a neighborhood middle school. Require the use of two buildings, both the current Monroe Demonstration Building located at 2010 East 48th Street North and the building currently called Penn Elementary located at 2138 East 48th Street North. Close Penn Elementary, Site 355, and require the modification of enrollment boundaries at a future board meeting such that students who would have attended Penn Elementary in the 2019-2020 school year will attend Anderson Elementary or Anderson Elementary or Hawthorne Elementary, depending on their residence. I want to make that clear. They can attend Anderson Elementary or Hawthorne Elementary, depending on their residence. Require the creation of a single middle school enrollment area to be presented at a future board meeting that will encompass all 6th to 8th grade students who live in the following elementary school boundaries: Anderson, Sealy Clinton, Gilcrease, Hawthorne, Springdale, Unity Learning Academy, and Whitman, and the 7th and 8th grade students living in the elementary boundary of Sequoia Elementary School. Change the grade configuration of the following elementary schools so that they no longer serve 6th grade: Anderson, Celia Clinton, Gilcrease, Hawthorne, Springdale, Unity Learning Academy, and Whitman, and close McLean Junior High, Site 662. The rationale for this recommendation stems from the February 14th Board of Education resolution to the North Tulsa Task Force recommendation regarding the creation of the new Monroe Demonstration Academy Neighborhood Middle School serving the McLean feeder pattern. And I will now entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
I will call forth the speakers on this item, beginning with Reverend Potter.
To the board president and Superintendent Gist and all the board members and to all who are present, thank you again for another opportunity to speak on behalf of this task force. We feel that we have completed the task that was assigned to us. We feel very good about what we have presented. We truly believe that the recommendation will bring quality education to the students and families in our community. This task force gave this recommendation not only its mind, its heart, its soul, but even its gut, and has actually been excited that actions are already in place to try and move this recommendation forward. We were really excited when the superintendent allowed this task force to be a part of these special committees that gives us an opportunity to try and help push this forward, because we truly believe that this recommendation will be successful because parents will be involved, students will be involved, the community will be involved, Tulsa Public School will be involved. Everyone must be involved to make this happen. And we're just confident and excited that you're considering this. Our prayers have gone forth. We had a special prayer meeting up on Sunday evening to ask God's favor upon this recommendation because we're passionate about our children. And it has been too long that children are falling through cracks. That we believe that now we can help these children receive quality educations. We can give to them hope, because when a person cannot find hope, he goes out and creates his own hope. And most often when he creates this hope, it's a negative hope, a hope that ends in prison, a hope that ends in death, a hope that ends in negative living. So we want to create hope for our young people, a quality education, a school that loves them, a district that loves them, a district that is doing its very best to make sure that they receive quality education. So again, we thank you. We're excited about all the members who served on this task force. They did a tremendous job. I never would have believed, I've never experienced a group like this group. So I personally thank you. And if you will just stand, the task force. Ms. McDonald raised her hand. Again, we're looking forward to approval and then putting our shoulders to the plow, because it's going to take everybody working hard going forward to make this a success. Again, thank you.
Nancy McDonald.
I'm okay. I'll raise it up.
This might work too.
Thanks, Paula. Thank you so much, Paula. Members of the Board of Education, Dr. Gist and staff, teachers that are present tonight, parents and members of the community. I'm Nancy McDonald, longtime volunteer in the Tulsa Public Schools and employee for 15 years. At present, I serve as a volunteer with All Souls Partners in Education, serving Gilcrease Elementary, Unity Academy, Learning Academy, and 7th grade academy. I'm a member of the Northside Task Force. And I am asking you to approve the recommendation before you in relationship to closing the 7th grade academy and moving all of our 6th graders and 7th graders, potential 7th graders, living in the McLean attendance zone to the new Monroe Demonstration Academy. I want to applaud the work of the task force members. They have held numerous meetings with experts from the Education Service Center on various topics. They have met with principals and teachers. They have met with teachers and parents and have had several community meetings, gathering information and crafting what we believe to be in the interest of all of the students in the McLean attendance zone. We believe the recommendations are sound and in the best interest of those students residing in this district. The plan for the middle school, a magnet or a middle school, is exemplary and will certainly serve the needs of the emerging adolescents. We're hoping to address their academic needs as well as their social needs. And we're asking you also, as we move forward, to address the academic and social needs of our children attending the elementary schools in the North Tulsa McLean attendance zone. I'm asking you to support this recommendation. We present it to you in the best interests of children. Thank you.
Richie Anderson.
I'd like to say good evening to the superintendent, members of the board, and everyone present. I'll start off. We heard about many things in North Tulsa, a lot of distrust, a lot of things that have gone wrong over many decades. And so this recommendation does not single-handedly right all the wrongs for many decades, but I do believe that it will allow us to take steps in the right direction. It'll allow some healing. Does that mean that we stop working? No. We're going to stay with this thing. We're going to make improvements to what we've already recommended, and we're going to get ideas, continue to get ideas from those who have been working long before I became a part of the task force. The reason that I got up to speak is I wanted to say thank you to our superintendent and members of the board. When we say we had meetings, I mean we had meetings. And they were meetings where people could express their feelings, get statistics, data on certain things. And so basically I commend you guys for the process that you went through, hearing from all the residents on this matter. So I, again, believe that we have a solid recommendation. We haven't proposed to actually close any school buildings. We've just mentioned that we will reuse those buildings in a different way. And so again, thank you very much, and I ask for your vote in the positive tonight for this recommendation. Thank you.
Jasmine Trotter.
Members of the board, Dr. Guest, and all that's present, good evening. I am Jasmine Trotter, and I am here in support of the North Tulsa Community Education Task Force. I am a product of Gilcrease and Monroe Middle School, where I was able to build a strong educational foundation. During my time at Gilcrease and Monroe, I was in advanced placement classes, and I had wonderful teachers that helped me succeed during those years. From there, I went on to Memorial High School, where I continued to thrive in advanced classes and kept up with the rest of my affluent peers. I then went on to receive my bachelor's degree from OSU, and I will be receiving my master's in May from OU. Gilcrease and Monroe has been pivotal to many students' educations for many years, and I believe it's possible that these schools will continue to make a difference within the North Tulsa community. I ask you to please accept this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our speakers this evening. Are there questions on this item? Ms. Marshall.
I too would like to thank the task force for all their hard work, and I would like to take a moment to say a few words. Tonight we are here with mixed emotions, fueled with memories, questions, failures, and doubts because of past broken promises and disappointments. And yet there is an air of excitement because we have hope. We have hope that the past is indeed simply yesterday's news, yesterday's experiences, and it has made up the building blocks which facilitate today's exceptional promises for where we're headed. And that is why I want to thank the task force. That's why I want to thank the superintendent and this board for what I believe will be a positive affirmation. Not so long ago, this board participated in equity training. And B. Scott wrote the following: systemic equity exists when systems and individuals habitually operate to ensure that every student has the greatest opportunity to learn, enhanced by the resources and supports necessary to achieve competence, excellence, independence, personal and social responsibility, and self-sufficiency for school and for life. And that's what this is all about. That is where we're headed today with the recommendations of this task force. And as I close my statements, I would be remiss if I did not remember Marva Collins, who stated, "Students do not need to be labeled or measured any more than they are. They don't need more federal funds, grants, and gimmicks. What they need from us is common sense, dedication, and bright, energetic teachers who believe that all children are achievers who take personally the failure of any one child." And I would say tonight that the children of the McLean feeder pattern have more than that, because they not only have teachers, but they have a school board, they have a superintendent, and they have a community and a task force who by tonight's activities is saying that we believe in you and that we're coming together arm in arm to say that we're in this together and we're about to make something successful out of the McLean feeder pattern. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Marshall. I only would want to double, everything she said, plus I want to double down on her thanks to the North Tulsa Task Force and each of the individuals that served on that. I know it was a lot of hours, a lot of time, and it's going to continue to be that, because what I think is beautiful about this is it's not only an solution, but it's a solution backed with all the work to make it happen between us and between the school district, between the churches, between the communities, between the after school, between everybody that participated in the task force. And I that's my favorite part about it, is the arm in arm. So again, thank you to the task force and just the real commitment to the work, and I hope to see the district match that. And I know Dr. Gist has some comments as well.
Thank you, Madam President. I just am so grateful for this Board of Education, and Ms. Marshall in particular, your leadership on this has been inspirational, and I have appreciated watching you lead in this process. And Reverend Potter, Reverend Chambers, Ms. Pittman, all the members of the task force, we are so grateful to you. We know that this action and this step is just the beginning. There's so much more work to do on the recommendations, but there's also so much more that we need to do to continue to build trust and to build our relationship with members of the community. And that was a huge part of what spurred this, was that recognition that we not only had tremendous work to do to get higher outcomes and better academic achievement for students, but also that we had so much work to do to build trust. And so we went into this with a spirit of radical collaboration, and we did something unprecedented to say that we are going to form a task force that's representative of many parts of the community, and empower essentially that task force with bringing a recommendation that we committed to supporting. And I can't tell you how deeply committed I am to the vision and the plan that this task force brought together. They took on an extraordinarily challenging task. They dove in and they did it wisely and tirelessly. You've heard about how much time and energy and effort they put into it. But I think not everyone realizes that of all the different possible options and models that were there, every single one of them had interesting components and exciting parts, but also varying numbers of unintended consequences. Every single possible scenario that could have been imagined. There wasn't one that someone would not have found a part of it that would be objectionable, but these leaders weren't daunted by that. They really listened, they considered, but they continued moving forward, and they kept focused on what was possible, and really centered at the heart of all of it was this belief in students that Ms. Marshall read from the quote from Marva Collins is essential to everything that we do. Not everyone's able to lead that way, and it was impressive to watch. This task force also didn't just take one of the options that had been sort of compiled after last year's community conversations, but instead really used those ideas combined with what they know about education, about our children, about our community, and also work that had been done by other entities, including the folks here from CUBES and so many others who've brought information to bear. And they used all of that to come up with a recommendation that was not just a recommendation, but truly a vision for the schools in the neighborhood. Now, some may second guess what's happening here and not recognize that every move that might have been made would have had challenging components. But I'm confident that everyone will get behind this and will see what's happening here and will believe in the vision that these leaders laid out. We have to have faith in these leaders and in this recommendation, and to see that what they've come up with has a true beauty, and it's going to be a game changer for students. The actions tonight put forward steps that will be part of one of the biggest components of the recommendation, which is the creation of one middle school at Monroe Demonstration Academy to serve as the middle school for all of the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders in that feeder pattern. But we want to make sure that the public also is aware that we have committed to other components of the recommendations as well, and that more work is ongoing, as Reverend Potter said. So specifically, we've committed to ensuring that there are 3 other components that were part of the recommendations. One is a moratorium on school closings in North Tulsa. Now, this is one we are supporting and want to do that for the next 2 or 3 years, and that is no small commitment. But I do want to, I think most people know that there is an exception to that I'll be recommending to the board about ECDC Bunch and Gilcrease. I want to make it really, really clear, this was not a recommendation of the task force. In fact, to the contrary, the task force had a recommendation about a moratorium. Now, what we wanted to do was make that commitment, but we couldn't make it with this very clear example of a feeder pattern structure that was inconsistent with the others within the neighborhood, and also with such really significant underutilization of buildings. And so that is an exception, but with that exception set aside, moratorium on school closings for the next 2 or 3 years. The second is a parent center at the Alcott Elementary School building, and we're working on the specifics of that, but this was an important component to say that we want opportunities for enrollment in the feeder pattern that are closer to home. The task force wanted to see opportunities for parent engagement and parent education and so forth. And then the next one was to continue working with the members of the task force in a new format. And not sure what that new format will be, but we are working with the task force to see how that format of structure of what they're doing can become permanent, so that it isn't just something that whoever is elected or whoever is functioning as superintendent at the time can choose to work with them or not, but rather is a standalone entity that will continue and live on regardless of who are in positions of formal leadership in the district. So those are the biggest categories of commitments in addition to the actions that are in the agenda. And the work has begun, as Reverend Potter said. We are all over it right now. And here's what I would say. This recommendation, what's so awesome about it is that it is not what I would have done originally. It's probably not what some of you might have done. And it maybe isn't even what some of the task force members went in thinking might be possible. But these collective leaders and their experience and their work together to work through possibilities and really examine all of the things that they were trying to put together about what's best for kids and what we know about the neighborhood and what we've learned about what hasn't worked in the past and all the different components really came together around something really, really powerful. And that's what happens when a diverse group of community leaders come together and work through that and stick with it, even when it gets hard. And we've had a lot of discussions to work through things. They did this with tremendous faith and tremendous conviction, and now it's about what happens next. What happens next is that we work together. We continue to work together. We have a chance to prove what can happen when a community and the school district do work together, and to do something really, really monumental for our students. And when we believe and when we do it together, I know that we will deliver for our students. So thank you again, and ready to see some action. That'll be our first formal step in implementing the recommendations.
Any other questions from board members? If not, I'll call for the vote. Ms. Wester?
Aye.
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 Aye. So from there, I'm going to turn the agenda over to Dr. Gist, and she will present the information on the agenda this evening.
Thank you, Madam President. As you know, information items are brought before the board for their consideration. They're not acted upon at the meeting, but rather discussed and will come back as either a consent or an action agenda item at a future meeting. Items G1 and G2 will be presented by our Chief Learning and Talent Officer, Devin Fletcher. Mr. Fletcher.
Thank you, Dr. Gist, Madam President, members of the board. Item G1 is a routine staffing item that relates to creates, deletes, and other conditional things for our employment. You'll note that there are 4 bus assistants that are being created on this agenda. And just for some additional information, these bus assistants ride on the buses to support students with special needs that may be written into their IEPs. I'll pause for questions there if you have any. Okay. Item G2 is a recommendation to enter into an agreement with Snickelbox. Snickelbox is an organization that supports us in our talent management team. We've engaged them specifically to work on a few projects. One of the projects is to support our team in leveraging the full capacity of our applicant tracking system, which will help us better improve our recruiting services for teachers coming into the district. The second is to update our manual contract process, which is for 6,300 employees, the process that we go through every year to send out new contracts. The reason why we only do it once a year is because it takes a whole lot of people spending a lot of hours like critiquing and reviewing and all of those things. And so we want to be able to more efficiently do that and to update those more frequently when changes occur. And then the third thing is to support streamlining of the administration of our FMLA. And so all of the things that we're proposing are to support and improve the process for current employees and to bringing on new employees. I'll pause there if you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. Item G3 is an item that is the acceptance of the single audit reports and schedule of expenditures of federal awards that includes the independent audit report on compliance with major programs and internal control over compliance issued by RSM US LLP for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2018. Our Chief Financial Officer, Norberto Delgadillo, is here to answer any questions board members might have about this item.
So the audit reports have been presented to the district?
Yes, they were presented back in December 17th. And now this is essentially a completion of the remaining portion of the single audit, which included fresh fruit and vegetables and a variety of other things to ensure that we are in compliance with all the federal programs, which we are. And it was just essentially dotting the I's, crossing the T's.
That was my follow-up question. Are we compliant? Great.
We are.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Mr. Delgadillo. And items G4 through G10 will be presented by our Executive Director of Bond Projects, Mr. Chris Hudgens. Mr. Hudgens.
Thank you, Dr. Guest, President Schreiber, and board members. Items G4, 5, and 6 all are dealing with the interior renovation at Cooper Elementary School. And G4 is to enter into contract with the lowest responsible bidder. G5 is to assign those contracts, and G6 is to approve the amendment with the construction manager, Crossland Construction. And this project is currently out to bid. We'll be bringing back the exact numbers with contractors' names for the consent agenda. Item G7 is to approve a memorandum of understanding with Project Bike Tech. This is a curriculum-based program, and it will be held at Tulsa Met to support our bike repair program. Currently, we have 15 schools with bike programs and additional 10 sites that are going to be increasing. And so this bike program will assist us in the bike repairs and actually be an educational program. That the total cost is $17,500. Item G8 is to approve the purchase of the energy management equipment from the lowest responsible bidder. Part of the 2015 bond issue is to replace our outdated equipment, and this is an item that will just replace that equipment. Items G9 and G10 are all dealing with the improvements at Penn and Monroe Demonstration Academy. Item 9 is to approve the engineer, and item 10 is to improve the construction manager, Trigon Construction, for the summer improvements. Are there any questions on any of those items?
So on item G7, the Bike Tech program, I'm assuming that grew out of Bike Club? Mr. Percival?
Not at Tulsa Met. This is part of the Bike Club.
But will they be working on Bike Club bikes?
I think that's to be determined, but very possibly, yeah.
Yes, that is my understanding, that they will be supporting the bike clubs, because this is the first time that the 10 additional schools, the bikes will be included in our PE programs as well. with the additional purchase of these. So this will actually support everything.
And importantly, and I think everybody realizes this, but I mean, this actually, there's an interesting backstory, which I won't give you all of it, but there were some students who, as part of their internships from the Met, were working to build and repair and be involved with the mechanics of bicycle creation. And they had such a positive experience that this is emerging from that, and it's taking it really to the next level. So it's both an educational experience for the students and the two students in particular a couple of years ago who got that launched, and then it's a way for us to continue to support the bicycle riding that's been happening around the district.
This is so exciting. People always complain that we don't have a shop anymore and things like that, but now we have a bike shop. I think that's awesome. So I'm excited to see this item. Okay, let's go. Mr. Huffhines, I think, is interested in speaking to G9 and G11. So if you want to present G11, and then we'll ask you to come up, Mr. Huffhines.
Oh, go ahead and present 11. Okay. So G11, I will present, and this is to request approval from the Board of Education to return 15 park benches that are currently located on the Council Oak Elementary School grounds to the Council Oak Elementary School Foundation. The foundation donated these benches, and they're now being replaced as part of the name transition efforts. And when a gift like that is made, it becomes property of the district. So we need this action in order to return that so that they can have those benches back. They will be replaced. They will be returned when they are replaced with new benches and when those are installed. And our Chief Operations Officer, Mr. Jorge Robles, is here to answer any questions board members might have.
Mr. Huffhines?
Peace, yes, peace. Greetings to our Honorable Superintendent, Dr. Gist, our Madam President, Suzanne Schreiber, and each of our Honorable Tulsa Public School Board members and honorable staff and team. We are grateful for all the teachers and citizens of this great city, Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's a joy to be with you on this 19th day of February in the year of our loving Lord, Jesus Christ, 2019. Yes, G9, recommendation. Approve supplement number 11 to the master contract with Allied Engineer Group, LLC for interior renovations at Penn Elementary School and Monroe Demonstration Academy. Remembering the persons our schools are named after can help us remain strong and can remind us we are on a mission, and there can be a reason to spend millions of taxpayers' dollars on improvements. In 1667, William Penn converts to Quakerism. He made Jesus Christ his Lord. The principle of the Quakers is the Spirit of Christ who died for us and is risen for our justification, by which we know we are his. He dwells in us by his Spirit. Plus, he emphasized the importance of being governed by God. Cost, Penn Elementary School, $1,500,000 estimated. Words of William Penn from his writings, Primitive Christianity. If friends here keep to God, the Lord will be with us, a king and a counselor forever. TPS Monroe Demonstration Academy appears to be receiving approximately $2 million worth of interior renovations. Monroe, James Monroe, was called a Christian statesman, reformer, also was ordained to preach the gospel. James Monroe, his character and leadership are consistent with community values. Again, the cost of these renovations, an estimated $2 million. G11, recommendation. Approve returning 15 park benches currently located on the Council Oak Elementary School grounds to the Council Oak Elementary School Foundation upon replacement with new benches. Council Oak. According to an article by Lori Kane, this oak tree became the site for Tulsa's first church. This tree is still alive and remains a symbol of our early settlers' strong spirit. Lori Kane. And yes, this site is also associated with morning prayer. Praying helped birth this great community, Tulsa, Oklahoma. and we can know vocal prayer, oral prayer, and the reading of the Bible in the classroom will help us remain strong. I support G11, and thank you, Madam President, for your excellent leadership.
Thank you. I'll return the agenda to you, Dr. Guest.
Thank you, Madam President. Items G12 and G13 will be presented by our General Counsel, Ms. Jana Burke. Ms. Burke.
Right. I'm excited to talk with you about our medical marijuana policy. Each of you have a handout of a PowerPoint presentation that we'll go through. It's several pages long, and it reflects the situation that we're in Oklahoma because of the change in state law. As you may recall, as of this July, and then in actuality in August in actual practice, we now as a state have medical marijuana available to individuals who submitted an application for a license to have medical marijuana. However, state law is not consistent with federal law. Federal law provides that marijuana, regardless of whether it's used for medical purposes or otherwise, is a Schedule I illegal drug under the Controlled Substances Act. So we have this conflict, and this context requires that we have and articulate a specific expectation of our employees and of our students so that there's no disagreement or misunderstanding about what the actual rules are. Next slide, please. Thank you. All right, so getting into the meat of the policy. We know that as a district, we want to protect the rights of individuals, and we have a state law that requires that we do not discriminate against employees or students because of their medical marijuana status. And this policy sets forth the expectation exactly like I just stated. Do you mind going back one? Thanks. The second provision of our policy that's important for you to know is that the use or possession of marijuana on district property is prohibited. That's still the case regardless of the change in state law, and regardless of the fact that the marijuana may be, according to the individual, medical marijuana that they're licensed to use because they have a valid medical marijuana license in Oklahoma. This is the reconciliation that we have between the state law and the federal law. And as a result, we are in a position to state that we really have no other alternative. The long and the short of it is that our obligations as a result of receiving federal funds require that we sign an agreement saying that we will not subject our employees or other individuals to a workplace with drugs. We have the federal drug and federal. Do you mind going back one more slide? Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Federal law requires that we provide a drug-free workplace. That's the language I was looking for. My tongue is tied today. As a condition of receiving federal grants, and that it's federal law, not state law, that defines what marijuana is and what a legal drug is for purposes of that particular act. And so as a result of needing our federal funds, we want to make sure that we have the proper alignment and compliance with federal law. So we have this particular balancing act that we have to abide by. And so as shown in the next slide. Yeah, there we go. One more.
I'm sorry. Is it possible to turn out the bank of lights so that people can actually see the slides better?
Okay. As a result of that, like I said earlier, the use and possession of marijuana on district property is prohibited, even if the individual maintains that the marijuana is a substance that they're using as a result of a valid marijuana license.
That's fine.
Okay. The next portion of our policy pertains to CBD, cannabidiol. The CBD oil is treated differently under both federal and state law, depending upon how much THC the CBD has. And it's relatively complex to go through each of the different types of variations and all the separate rules. But in the long and short of it is that if the CBD has no THC, then it can be administered to students by the parent or guardian, but not by an employee. If the CBD contains 0% THC and the individual we're talking about is a non-student, like an employee or some other individual on our property, they may possess and use the CBD, but the employees may not use it in the presence of students. Okay, the next point regarding CBD is that there are some formulations that have up to 0.3% that under federal and state law are legal, but there are special technical requirements that are pretty substantial that you'll see in the policy. In broad strokes, I would explain that students must either have a medical marijuana license to be administered this type of CBD by their parent or guardian, or be diagnosed with one of the enumerated medical conditions by a physician in the state of Oklahoma. In the instance that they receive this type of CBD from their parent or guardian, the parent or guardian would come onto the premises, give that CBD to the student, and then take it off the property. If we're talking about a non-student, typically that's going to be an employee or some other non-student individual on the property, they may, again, use CBD if they have the medical marijuana license. And again, I'm talking about the CBD with the higher proportion of THC. But they, again, must either have that license or have one of the enumerated medical conditions. They can administer it to themselves, unlike students, but they may not, employees may not do so in the presence of students. So those are the two different broad strokes explanations of the CBD situation in Oklahoma when we try and reconcile that language with the federal language and the Oklahoma language. Finally, it is true that there is one drug, and I believe that it helps treat epilepsy. It is an FDA-approved medication. It is not CBD in the terminology. It has an actual trade name. And that FDA-approved drug is not subject to this policy. Okay, finally, there are individuals that pursuant to specific federal law may not have any use of marijuana, even if they have a valid medical marijuana license. And those are the individuals who you would most expect to have more restrictive provisions provided upon them. Those are our bus drivers and the individuals on our district that use guns, our campus police personnel. So the policy also specifies specific restrictions and expectations of those employees in addition to just the general provisions that pertain to our students and to our other employees, and to our employees generally. Any questions about the policy?
We do have a speaker to this item, Mr. Ed McIntosh. I'm sorry, you're on 13?
You don't want to speak to medical marijuana, Mr. McIntosh?
Well, I think it is.
Speak to 13.
Mr. McIntosh, give us a second because we haven't presented 13 yet. Hang on.
Okay.
Any questions on 12? Okay. So we'll move to 13, and I'll have Dr. Gibbs present that, and then Mr. McIntosh, you can stay. I think it'll just be a minute.
Yeah. Ms. Burke is 13.
Yes. All right, ready for 13
Yes,
now? Great, thank
we're ready.
you. Okay, so we're now moving on to the policy that pertains to the discipline of support employees. This is in your supporting materials, and it allows us to reconsider and essentially update with more clear language the provisions that pertain to our employees when they are either suspended, dismissed, non-reemployed, or otherwise terminated. This policy is a policy that's been in effect for many years in our district, and it has been used by both, AFT, our union supporting our support employees, as well as the district, in relatively smooth processes. However, the language itself was very cumbersome to navigate, so we decided to make it more accessible to the average user so that it's clear to the support employee, depending upon which type of employee you are, in terms of tenure, whether or not you've been here more than a year or less than a year, or whether you're a full-time employee or less than full-time employee, you know which provisions apply to you. So that's the number one change that you will see in this particular policy as compared to the existing policy. The other couple of changes that I'd like to bring forward to you, and they're very minor, are those substantive changes. And the first one is that currently we have 5 working days as a matter of default to conduct an investigation to determine whether or not a recommendation should be brought forth to discipline an employee. It's very often the case that we need more time than 5 days. 10 working days is more appropriate. It's typically what AFT and TPS agree to informally because we just don't want to be rushed. We want to make sure that we get adequate information. And so revising the policy to more appropriately align with our actual practice from 5 working days to 10 working days, we're setting it up an expectation for the employee who's reading this policy to know, in fact, what could actually be the case and what they should expect. The other change that I would like to bring forth to you and explain, because it's substantive, applies to the provision regarding the review committee. At present, and I should actually say it this way, for many years, TPS has had a type of what I would call intermediate review of discipline decisions. This decision, this type of policy is different from what I've ever seen in any other district. And what it allows for is for the district to bring forth a recommendation to discipline an employee, not immediately to the board, but to a panel of 3 district employees. We call that the review committee. The review committee hears the evidence brought forth by the district regarding why the employee should be disciplined, and the employee, who may be represented by counsel or even a representative from AFT, will present their evidence as well. The 3 district employees who are the review committee hear the evidence, deliberate in private, and then come back and provide the decision of the committee as to whether or not the recommendation to discipline the employee should be carried forth. This allows for a couple of benefits. One, reflects the fact that we're a large district. We have a lot of support employees, and it's just a more efficient process to use this type of procedure prior to going to the full board, especially when we can make an immediate decision that both the employee and the district feel resolves the issue well enough that they can just leave it there. However, we've always had the right for the employee to, in writing, for the employee to bring an appeal of a decision made by the review committee that they do not agree with to the full board. Because by state law, it is the board that is vested with final decision-making authority regarding the termination, the discipline of a support employee. What we do in this policy is make it clear that that right to bring the final decision to the board can be brought by not just the employee, but also the superintendent specifically. That allows us to reflect what state law is and better provide for our employees to know exactly what is the expectation they should have for this process. So those are the changes that you will see in our policy. Everything else is simply a moving around of the language and making it more clear.
Mr. McIntosh, I apologize. I probably should have let you sit down because that was a little bit longer than I thought it would be, but I'm glad you stayed.
Okay. Thank you. Superintendent Gist, Madam President, and newly seated board members, welcome. My concern with the policy is as follows. First, we recognize that this is your policy to do with as you please. You make wallpaper out of it, toilet paper out of it, wrapping paper out of it, rewrite it, modify it, take it away, add to it, or change it in any way you see fit. When we first received the draft of the proposed revision of this suspension, demotion, and termination non-reemployment of support employees in December of last year, it already had a revised date of February 2019. Makes me wonder if somebody was psychic. We were asked to give our opinion on the proposed policy changes, but once given, little and no consideration appeared to have been taken. One of the main sticking points that we had was if the committee rejects, modifies the recommendation and the superintendent don't like it, then the superintendent will have the option to bring it to you, the Board of Education. Our question then became, why do we need a hearing if we're going to bring it to you anyway? So We also had a problem with the double jeopardy law, as we see it. Cornell Law School states that the double jeopardy clause of the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution prohibits anyone from being prosecuted twice for substantially the same crime. We look at it as that. We had the hearing, the board, the committee made a decision, we either move on or we let it go. Fortunately, there's a provision in our signed contract with the district that states in part that the board shall enact no policy that would alter the terms of existing collective bargaining contracts. It is our intention, board members, to hold your feet to that statement.
Thank you. Any questions regarding G13 or comments from the board? I have a question. So on the review committee that is prior to a board review that currently can only be sought by the employee, it's always a termination, correct?
I'll make one correction. It's not the case that it can currently only be brought by the employee. As a matter of law, it could always be brought by the superintendent. It's just that the policy was not clear about that. There are two or more provisions in state law that specifically provide the board not a three-employee panel with final decision-making authority. By providing this opportunity, we not only have an increase in efficiency of the district, but we also provide a more private forum for an employee to hear the evidence against them. Both sides can hear what the facts are as they see fit, and as they have investigated and found them to be true, and evaluate the strength of the evidence before going before an entire public meeting and a full board. And therefore, this provides not just a benefit to the district in terms of efficiency, but also an initial opportunity for an employee to hear what the case is against them, and for the employer, the district, to even determine, you know, our evidence needs to be reevaluated. Considering the evidence that was brought forth by the employee, we don't want to go to the full board. We think it's best for us to just stop with the review committee's decision in the event that the review committee decides to reject the recommendation of the district. So
Who sits on the review committee?
There are 3 district employees that are brought to the review committee as the panel, and by policy, there is no limitation other than the fact that they may not be an individual who serves on the same team as the employee who's being recommended for discipline.
Is the committee permanent or does it change?
It changes.
Under what procedure?
Well, my understanding is that talent management typically has a pool of individuals that they have spoken with about the opportunity to sit on this panel, have described to them the process that panel uses to view the evidence to make a decision, and then as time goes by, depending upon the necessity of an actual review committee hearing, they will call 3 of those individuals and see if they are available to speak, or excuse me, to sit on that committee. There is no particular rotating schedule. It's just whatever we can find in terms of availability for that particular employee in the timing of the year.
It's akin to jury duty in a sense, if that helps to clarify that.
Prior to the future possible change, has the superintendent requested review of the panel's decision as you maintain is permitted by state law?
To my knowledge, we have not. There have been situations where the recommendation brought forth by the district was not upheld or accepted by the review committee, and the district determined that the evidence was such that they did not want to bring it to the full board. But in the event that we have a decision that should be brought to the full board, we wanted that opportunity.
Ms. Marshall.
What training does the individuals receive in order to sit on these panels?
This is a very informal process that does not use rules of evidence or procedure, because we don't want to saddle the employee with the obligation of preparing like it's a trial. And so it's an even less formal procedure than you use in your own hearing when you were hearing the disciplinary recommendation from the superintendent. So the actual training is relatively unnecessary, but we do provide an explanation of what is entailed. We go through the actual policy explaining to them what the different rights are of the individual in terms of notice, in terms of the causes that must be found to exist in order to mete out the discipline that's being recommended. So it's relatively general. It's relatively unnecessary to get into a lot of technical training.
Thank you.
Ms. Keller?
Thank you. Ms. Burke, is it possible to provide us with a copy of the state law that you've referenced?
Sure, I can give you the citation, and would you like that citation now or just the actual statute itself?
The text of the statute would be
Okay.
more helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
I can send that to you. Thank you.
So I just want to make sure I'm clear. Through the processes of deciding on a termination, the administration has decided to terminate an employee. The decision has been made among the administration. The employee has the right to appeal that decision and goes before a panel. If in fact the panel decides against the termination, the administration would have the opportunity to appeal that and defend their decision to the Board of Education.
Right. The only change that I would make in what you've described is that nothing is a decision until the board acts. These are always recommendations. In fact, in the event that the review committee decides to accept the recommendation of the district to discipline an employee, it is not actually final until the board has that termination cross the agenda. So in no situation is any party making a decision that is appealed. It's a recommendation that is accepted or rejected, and the board always, through its own processes, whether it's a formal hearing or whether it's through the agenda process, will make a decision on whether or not to act on that discipline.
Additional due process.
Thank you. Ms. Keller?
I'm sorry, I have one more question. Is this change reflected at all in our contract with AFT and our support employees? Does it change negotiations? Is it something that needs to be changed?
No, it does not change the negotiated language. In fact, the actual policy itself contemplates that before the change, that nothing in this regulation would prevent the Board of Education from acting on its own volition in matters pertaining to suspension with or without pay, demotion, dismissal, or non-reemployment of support employees. So we already had this language that contemplates it but doesn't specifically state it out. And the fact that we have a misunderstanding or perhaps an assumption that's incorrect demonstrates the fact that we need more specific language in the actual policy so employees are clear about what they should expect.
What does the policy say in regards to teachers?
So the teacher's policy for dismissal is set out very specifically in state statute. And we do not have a specific policy that pertains to teachers. By law, we have to have a policy that pertains to support employees. So this is not something that we just decided to do. By law, we must have such a policy.
But the teachers have a panel that they can appeal a termination to decision to.
No, ma'am.
Oh, they come directly to the board?
That's
only.
Correct. The recommendation is only brought to the board. It's not brought to any intermediate group at all. And the final decision is only made by the board.
Thank you. That concludes our information agenda. Dr. Gist, is there a staff report this evening?
We do have a staff report tonight, Madam President and board members and others. This is a staff presentation that will be delivered by our Deputy Superintendent, Ms. Paula Shannon, and members of her team. And this is a staff report that is about our quarter 2 performance. Deputy Shannon.
Thank you, Superintendent Gist, President Schreiber, members of the board. We're excited to share an update on our quarter 2 performance. I'm going to wait for my colleagues to arrive up front here before I dive in. And I love that so many of you stayed this evening. We have some exciting spotlights to share on our schools. And it's also, for those of you in the audience, been quite an interesting board meeting. There's been a diversity of topic in our board agenda this evening. So let's ground first and foremost in reminding ourselves of our mission and vision here in Tulsa Public Schools. It drives me crazy because I always have to bend over. So thinking about our mission and vision, I want to highlight that our mission is to inspire and prepare every student, regardless of where they live in the great city of Tulsa, to love learning, achieve ambitious goals, to be prepared for college, careers, and life. That's why we're here. We know that we're going to achieve this by being learners, contributors, and designers. That grounds us in our vision of destination excellence. What does that mean about performers? Well, about our performance, we're learners when we're very data-driven. When we use all of the different data points that we have that help us learn how well kids are learning, when they're learning, how well our instructional practices are reaching students, and we can adjust based upon that. So data is very important. As contributors, we have to be committed to investing in each other. So as our information helps us understand how to better support our teachers, we learn. As we realize that things aren't working out so well, we fail forward and we improve. And then finally, as designers, we're committed to innovating and continuously improving. So this evening, we'll talk a lot about how we're assessing, reflecting, and adjusting to meet the goals that we have set this year. Again, we're going to ground in quarter two. So quarter two ended in December as we broke for the holidays. Quarter three started when we returned in January. And we're going to hear from some of our instructional leadership directors this evening around some specific schools and the great work that they are leading and helping us learn from. So I'm going to turn it over to Sean Bergstresser, who's our Director of Data Strategy, to give us an update. I was going to give you a new title. To give us an update or just a reminder of our scorecard, the parts of our scorecard we're going to talk about tonight, and then we'll dive into results.
Thank you, Paula. Yes, so just as a reminder, we're taking these reports quarterly to the board, and we're really organizing them around these 4 key categories on our district scorecard. So we're closely monitoring progress in all of these: college and career-ready graduates, academic excellence, safe, supportive, and joyful school culture and climate, and organizational health. So just a couple updates on 2 of these categories that we don't actually have new information about right now. One is college and career-ready graduates. We hope to actually finalize from the state some of our graduation data from last year so that we can see how our 2018 cohort did, so that should be available very soon. We also have SAT testing across the system for our 11th graders coming up in April, so that's just kind of a reminder. That's a big touch point for that measure. Organizational health, we just finalized for the first time across all of the district, all of our employees, a staff engagement survey to really help us understand things like commitment to the organization, how satisfied people are with their work, and we'll have information on that for the next quarter report. For tonight, we have updates in 2 of our key categories. Academic excellence, so we have winter math proficiency, students tested at the end of December before the semester break, and we also have fall to winter growth. So both of those can help us understand how students are progressing through the year. One thing to note about winter math proficiency, we test a little bit earlier than lots of other districts across the country. So we typically do see a little bit of a dip in proficiency in the winter. But again, it doesn't mean our students aren't learning. That means that we're comparing ourselves nationally at any given point in time. And that's how we're defining proficiency. We also have updated data on attendance rate, chronic absenteeism, and suspensions for our school climate and culture category. So I'll hand it back to Deputy Superintendent Shannon to talk about how we're doing on those.
So what you have here is our scorecard. We have our results from 2017-18. You'll see a comparison to where we are this school year through quarter 2 and what our 18-19 goal is. So in academic excellence in safe, supportive, and joyful school cultures, it's where we have the most data to talk about for quarter two. We see that we're pretty consistent with where we were last year in terms of academic excellence. When we ended 17-18, you'll see our results. We're in a similar place mid-year, and we have much work to do to meet our goals by the end of this year. We're going to hear a little bit about a couple of bright spots that we're learning from the instructional leadership directors in this area. So Dr. Lovett will talk about Lewis and Clark. Jennifer Grappado will talk about Anderson and Hawthorne, where we have a lot of great work happening through some of our pilots that's helping us really move the needle on results for students so that we can meet our goals. And when it comes to culture climate, we are ahead of where we ended the year in attendance, in increasing attendance and reducing chronic absenteeism, and in reducing the amount of out-of-school suspension that we use. And you'll see that we are on track, if things hold, to meet our goals. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means for attendance further in the presentation. And then as Sean described, we'll have more information in quarter three around organizational health, specifically as it pertains to engagement and service to our employees. And we should soon have those 2018 graduation rates finalized. I'm going to ask Stacy Vinson, who's one of our secondary instructional leadership directors, to give some updates on some of the work that we're doing in the college and career ready area to ensure that our 2019 graduates remain on track to graduate on time.
I just want to clarify, Deputy Superintendent, have the 2018 graduation requirements finished by the state?
Correct.
So
it's not us. We're waiting on the state to finalize things.
Right. So we have a good sense of where we are because we keep the records ourselves and understand how those formulas work, and we feel very confident about that. But until we get that verification, it's just not something we want to. It wouldn't be appropriate to roll that out till we really had the go-ahead from the state.
Yes, it's frustrating because there's such a delay. So, Stacy.
Thanks. Good evening. So a couple of things that I would like to highlight with you all in terms of ensuring that our 2019 kids graduate and are college and career ready. One of the things our schools, bless you, are currently doing is using our data dashboard for on track to graduate. So this dashboard allows multiple people in the school within a few clicks to understand how many students are off track, what they need, whether it's academic courses, CPR, personal financial literacy, and they can even drill down to the student and know exactly what course or what requirement they're missing. So for example, with a few clicks, Memorial High School can find out and know that they have 9 students who should be graduating in May that are lacking just a half credit, so that they're able to go back now before spring break, meet with those students and parents, get them enrolled in the credit recovery. Those students will now be able to graduate on time in May. This is something before that counselors had to do student by student. So it's much more efficient, and it's a much quicker way for our schools to know the status of the students in real time. The second thing I want to share with you just briefly is our new individual career academic plan, or ICAP. This is currently being piloted at East Central High School. This is going to be mandated by the state and implemented with all 9th grade students next year. It will grow up each year, so eventually it's implemented grades 9 through 12. One of the things that it does that we're really excited about in the freshman year, the 10 to 12 tasks that students have to do really center around students being able to understand how they learn, students understanding and taking interest surveys, doing some career exploration, and then also some college and university exploration as well. So that then they can work with their advisor, their teachers, to determine, okay, this is where maybe I have an affinity for a talent or a subject or an interest, so that they're able to then sit down with their guidance counselor and be able to set goals and know where they want to be after they complete high school, set some real clear goals to get there, and make sure that they're taking the proper coursework. So another way to think about that is if I'm a freshman and I'm sitting in Landlock, Oklahoma, but I know I like animals, And then all of a sudden, in some other exploration, I find out, science, oceanography, some careers, marine biology that never would have dawned on me. As a freshman, I'm able to have some of those ideas. And then my guidance counselor can make sure that I've taken enough science and math courses to be able to be admitted into a biology department at a university. So things like that we're really excited about. The other component that is with this is a parent component. So every year, parents are also included and sign on the ICAP information. So that's just kind of a sneak preview of what's to come in terms of making sure our students are college and career ready.
Thanks, Stacy. Now Sean will launch us in academic excellence, and then we'll hear from Dr. Lovett and Jennifer Grapato, who are two of our elementary instructional leadership directors.
Thank you, Paula. So I had to argue for these, but I got a few fun slides, so I'm excited to take these. All right, so these slides are really highlighting some of our schools where we're seeing lots of growth this year from fall to winter. So remember, nationally, 50% of kids meet their projected growth and 50% don't, based on the assessment that we use. So when you see schools where over 50% of kids are meeting or exceeding projected growth, what that means is that students at those schools are catching up or moving ahead compared to their national peers. This slide shows all of our elementary schools where at least 50% or more of the students were meeting or exceeding math growth from fall to winter. So just point out a couple schools here. One is Lewis and Clark, 65% of students, really phenomenal growth. You'll hear from them or about them in a second. Anderson and Hawthorne both up here. Wayman Tisdale is up here, 56% of students met their math growth. So all of those are some schools that we'll dive into a little bit deeper. This slide shows reading. So the same thing applies. If over 50% are meeting or exceeding growth, that's a really good thing. That's what we want to see more and more of. Wayman Tisdale had 60% of students. And overall, you can see that there's not as many of our elementary schools where this was the case. So reading as a system is still something that we need to continue to focus on. This is for our secondary schools, so middle, junior highs, and then high schools. I think to point out a couple schools that really stand out on this slide, Monroe, who we talked about earlier tonight, had 54% of students meet and exceed their math growth. They also had over 50% with reading. So we see both of those subjects. And then Rogers College High School as well is on here for both subjects. So some promising things that we see. And I want to pass it off to Dr. Lovett to talk a little bit more about what's going on at Lewis and Clark Elementary that's leading to these results.
Thank you, Sean. I'm excited to talk to you about Lewis and Clark and the growth that they are experiencing. As you look at the graph, you can see the comparison in growth from last year, this time to this year in reading and math. And as you know, in reading, they maintained above the 50th percentile in growth. But look at math, how they moved from 56th percentile in growth to 65 percentile. And when you look at this rise in growth, we know that more than 50 additional students are at proficiency in math. Because of this growth, 50 more students are proficient in math, and we're very, very proud of that. You might wonder, what did Lewis and Clark do to have this kind of growth in reading and math? Well, first of all, Lewis and Clark has created a safe, caring environment where students feel positively connected to others and where teachers make learning meaningful and fun. Alongside this caring environment, Mr. Griffith and his students and his staff have high expectations for the students of Lewis and Clark. Number two, daily, all students receive on-grade level instruction in reading and math, utilizing our district curriculum. For reading, they use CKLA, which is the core knowledge language arts program. And in math, they use Eureka. Lewis and Clark teachers work diligently to teach the curriculum with consistency and with fidelity. Mr. Griffith and his teachers study and analyze student data to determine which students need additional supports in reading and math. For reading interventions, They use SRA Reading Mastery for grades K through 2, and they use System 44 and Read 180 for grades 3 through 6. And for math, they use small group instruction along with the computer programs of Zern, MobiMax, Prodigy to help students close those skill gaps. And finally, during their weekly PLCs, Mr. Griffith and his teachers study their map data, they discuss and monitor student progress, they examine student work, and they determine the action plans for students in an effort to close the skill gaps in reading and math with the goal of increasing growth and proficiency of the students that they serve. Now I'll turn it over to Jennifer.
Good evening. I'd like to take a few moments to share with you about Hawthorne Elementary and Anderson Elementary. They're both in my network and are showing as bright spots among academic excellence. So when we look at the data for Hawthorne Elementary, you'll notice that Carisha Solomon, our principal, and her teachers have sustained positive growth in academics over the last couple of years, and we can see that they're exceeding the national average when it comes to both reading and math this year. And so we're seeing Hawthorne Elementary closing the achievement gap for several of our students, and we're super proud about that. When we look at Anderson Elementary, you'll notice that Anderson has increased the number of proficient students in 2 consecutive years, and that they start at the beginning of the year under the fall data, relatively low, and then we see the MAP data increase in the winter months. And then in the spring, we see it continue to accelerate. We're still waiting on this year's spring data. But what this tells us is that the school has a positive impact and is making significant strides in outcomes for children, but it also shows us that the summer can have a devastating negative impact on students' growth and learning, and that often our schools have to make up the difference during the year. So what are some explicit actions that both Principal Thompson and Principal Solomon are taking? They're both part of our Empower cohort, which is explicitly focused on building teacher leadership within their buildings. So Principal Solomon and Principal Thompson are working and coaching on developing strong cadres of lead teachers who consistently use 90 minutes of plan time each week to support teachers in both instructional strategies and content knowledge. So what do I need to teach and how do I teach it? And both these principals understand that you can't fall to one strategy and reap the benefits that we need to see in our children, that you have to simultaneously lift increasing teachers' confidence and abilities to use quality instructional strategies while also knowing and having confidence in the content they're teaching. So the principals are working with the teacher leaders to lift both of those tasks at once. Both of these schools also have strong intervention programs that have different platforms and different strategies that they're using, but they're consistently implementing intervention programs for students on a daily basis in which kids have an opportunity to spend some quality time working on the gaps or the skills that each child needs to work on to personally improve his or her current status. So those are a couple of strategies that are happening in my network.
Thanks, Jennifer. One other thing that Sean and I were talking about this earlier, and I think I shared it. Hanya, you were there this morning with some community partners. At Anderson, we described in our State of the District how 98% of kindergarten students at the end of the 17-18 school year met their growth goals, and they left kindergarten ready for first grade. So imagine, illustratively, that you've got 75 kindergarten students, and 98% of them, which means all but one, met their reading growth goal, and they're ready for first grade. And then what we understand at the beginning of first grade is those 75 students lost a lot. And now 0 of them are meeting their reading growth goal. Not because teachers aren't working hard and lots of work is happening at schools, but because what happens in the summer is so fundamentally important. So call out to our community to continue to help us in thinking through all of those opportunities that we can provide our young people in the summer, because they matter mightily. So just wanted to give that very, very concrete example. So when we move on to school culture climate, and we're looking at decreasing chronic absenteeism, which is a primary thing that we need to do to actually increase overall attendance. We have some real bright spots across a number of our schools, and you'll see them here. So ECDC Bunch, so far this year, Bunch students have experienced nearly 200 additional instructional days compared to last year. So those are our babies, and 200 additional instructional days matters. Wayman Tisdale, who we'll talk about here in a minute, through Q2, Tisdale has 30 fewer chronically absent students than last year. And finally, Jason Gillies doing some great work that Robert Shornick will share, which has resulted in nearly 40 fewer chronically absent students. Just a reminder, when we talk about kids being chronically absent, it means that students are missing 10% or more of the school year for whatever reason. And then some promising current trends. If you look at the graph, the green line is this year, and the blue and red lines are the previous 2 years. And we follow national trends. Typically, we start off really high because everybody's excited to come back to school, and then across the year, attendance starts to decline. You'll see that at the end of Q2, as we were going into the holidays, we took a big dip. We were very worried about that. But we're also excited because we start to see that as we worked across January and into February, the line started to level out versus continuing to decline, which is what has happened in previous years. So our schools are working very hard. They all have attendance goals. A number of them, I would say the vast majority of them, are learning from one another. They're attending trainings with Hetty Chang to really improve practice, and are learning from schools like Central and Tisdale, who Kayla Robinson and Robert Shornick will describe some of what they're doing. That is starting to spread across our schools to really ensure that students feel safe, secure, and we're figuring out what's happening in their lives to help get them to school. So I'll have Kayla come talk about Wayman Tisdale.
Thanks. So Tisdale is really rocking some attendance. They are working really hard on meeting a goal. And you may have noticed that their average attendance right now is about 3% higher than it was this same time last year. And that may not sound like a lot, but when combined with the decrease in chronic absenteeism, which is about 8%, overall, those students have recouped over 300 days of instruction. So that's based on number of students that are impacted by increased attendance, reduced chronic absenteeism, and number of days that they're actually at school. So I say that they're rocking it. So how on earth is this happening? Well, one of the things that I've noticed about Tisdale when I'm there is that they have a daily objective, and every single person in the school knows what it is. And their objective is that on any given day, there will not be more than 18 students absent. And they're all committed to doing whatever it takes to make sure that that number never rises above 18. And they get support from some other district departments, which I think is really cool. So the Department of Student and Family Supports has helped them with some strategies. And as Paula said, they've attended some training. So they really feel better equipped to help families with something that previously they may have thought was not within their control. And now they know that it is. They can really make a difference. So when I've gone around the school and asked people what they think is really helping, here are some of the things that I've been told. So I asked parents, so how does the school help you with getting your child to school? And I found out that the health assistant has taken a very active role on their attendance team based on some things that she learned at training. And she now calls parents when a child is sick, not just to tell them to come and pick them up, but she calls them to let them know what our district guidelines are on when a child really needs to go home, how long they need to stay home, and when they reasonably should be back at school. And then she calls them back just to check in to see how things are going. So parents say that's really making a difference. So if I ask the teachers, they say things like, well, we can actually see attendance. So I've asked, what do you mean by that? Well, it's posted all over the halls. They track attendance every day. If a class has perfect attendance, they drop a ping pong ball in a tube, and the average attendance for the class for the day is posted on a board. Well, then if I ask the kids, well, what about attendance and what do you know about it? They tell me that they get to make the announcements at the end of the day to say how good they're doing, and they love that more than anything. I actually witnessed a child in the office have a moment with his mom when she wanted to check him out early, and he was going to make an announcement about their class having perfect attendance. So I'll let you visualize what that moment looked like, because he did not want to leave. So all of those things are strategies that we're learning through training and partnerships, and it is beginning to make a difference, and those strategies are portable and other schools can employ them. So let's hear from a peer about a secondary bright spot.
So just like my colleagues behind me, I'm super excited to be standing in front of you today to talk about one of the schools that I do serve, specifically Central High School. Central High School, as you can see from the slide behind you, received more than 750 instructional days through increased attendance. Additionally, Central High School is on track in meeting their attendance goal that they set at the beginning of Q1, which to me is fantastic. And as I reflect on the Q2 data, I feel like there are many contributors to the success. But before we dive into that, I want to just take just a brief moment to talk about the leadership that is at Central High School and what the leadership has done over the last several months to make sure that we're gaining some traction in regards to attendance rates and chronic absenteeism. Principal Gilly has placed a huge emphasis on the adult-student relationships within his building. More specifically, you can walk into Central on any given day, and you can see him sitting at the cafeteria table having lunch with his kids. You could also, on any given day, walk in, and he's possibly singing karaoke with the kids during lunch in the cafeteria. You can also see him sitting outside with his mobile desk in the hallway, guiding students, mentoring students, talking to students. Again, really focusing in on that adult-student relationship. I would also like to add that I've witnessed Principal Gilly over the last several months really make decisions that are student-related and really pouring a servant heart into helping his students, but also his school community. I want to talk just briefly, just for a second, about what I consider the 5 ingredients that have led to his success and Central success around attendance and chronic absenteeism. First and foremost, he's developed a very strong attendance team, an attendance team that is composed of administrators, teachers, support staff, individuals that take a very, very intentional look at the data. He has continuously focused on community outreach. Specifically, you can see him on every first Thursday from 4:30 to 6:30 at any community location that serves Central to basically serve as an outreach for his community. He's also revamped their advisory and mentoring period. This allows for a more intentional and adult-student relationship to be formed during that period. Strategically, he has partnered with Impact Tulsa and also our student family support services. Based upon trend data that we've observed over the last 2 to 3 years at Central, forming that very strategic partnership. And lastly, just in creating a sense of school pride and bringing student voice to the table by embedding a very strong student council, really leaning on his students as regards to how we can improve attendance and reduce chronic absenteeism.
So now we're going to move into the appendix slides. Not really, it's a joke. So some key learnings. Our instructional leadership directors have shared a number of stories from our schools, and I think they all help to highlight some key headlines here. We know change is possible when we work together, use data, and implement best practices. So we know a lot of what to do. We're learning best practices. We have to implement them and learn from them. School teams are reflecting, adjusting, and taking urgent action to create positive change. So our instructional leadership directors work monthly with our school leaders at what we call Live the Learning meetings, where they're reviewing their action plans and making adjustments. And school leaders are going back and working with their teams, like their attendance teams. School leadership teams are learning from each other. So during those Live the Learning meetings in our school leadership institutes each month, principals have the opportunity to share out both their challenges and their successes and to learn from each other. And they're adjusting along the way. And finally, we are doing a much better job of working with our partners and the community differently through things like quarterly partner meetings that we had this morning to share how we're doing, to talk about challenges that we're facing. We're also better leveraging collaborative action networks led by Impact Tulsa, as you heard a little bit about Central's case. That's really helping us bring the right people together at the right time to work on hard stuff together, to see what's working, what isn't, and to adjust course. And doing it all knowing that Tulsa Public Schools can't do it alone, that we need our partners and we need our families, and together we can make the urgent change that's needed. So happy to engage in any discussion or answer any questions you may have.
Any questions from board members? I give a shout out to Tisdale. I think they made it on all the lists, which is awesome. And I love to see this positive news. I think we don't pause on it enough. It's just fantastic. And my favorite part, I'm not sure if it was exactly one of your learnings, but that all these principals are figuring out what works for their building to encourage their staff and their students. It's just, you can see in your reports that it's very individual to that community. And that's when we that notion of working together and really figuring out what's specific to that specific community, the micro community within the larger one. Congratulations to everyone. This is a great report.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Do we have any board member reports or concerns this evening? We don't have any citizens' comments this evening. And Dr. Gist, do you have a superintendent report?
I do. I just want to make sure to acknowledge we have had a lot of really important people here in the audience tonight. We heard from a leader of our support employees. We heard from our task force. We also have a number of teachers and other educators in the room tonight. And it's just so important for us to acknowledge them. And I will tell you that when the task force was working and they were talking about Monroe Demonstration Academy, what was evident over and over and over again and what they shared is that they recognize that what happens at Monroe Demonstration Academy, including the positive results that you saw demonstrated here in terms of student growth, it's not about the building. And it's not even about the programs that the building, that the team implements. It is about what happens when incredibly dedicated educators work together in collaboration and stick to it and make awesome things happen. And so I just wanted to acknowledge the school leaders who are here, Principal Langley, Rex Langley, and Assistant Principal Rob Kaiser, who are here. And they also have with them Miss Ann Stone, who is this year's Support Employee of the Year for the entire district. She is here. And Monroe Demonstration Academy also happens to have, and I say happens because it's not planned, they're two different committees, but they also have this year's Teacher of the Year, Shaniqua Ray, who is a teacher there at Monroe. And I want to just say that, you know, this is a lot for school leaders and members of this team to take on with, you know, imagining these recommendations and then working with us to carry them out. This is a massive change for them, and they've been awesome. I also want to acknowledge that it's a massive change for our teachers at Monroe, at McLean, at the 7th grade academy, at McLean High School, at all of the elementary schools in the feeder pattern whose 6th graders will be going to the middle school. Certainly for our teachers at Penn, who this is a very significant change for them. and a very hard one, but one that they have given us great feedback that has helped us to make really good decisions about how we support students and how we support each of those teachers. And then also, we have our Gilcrease teachers, a number of them here with us today. And I want to say that Nicole Powell, who is here, one of those teachers, was announced today in a surprise announcement at Gilcrease that she's one of the finalists for Teacher of the Year for this year. So congratulations to you, Ms. Powell. And we know that all of your colleagues at Gilcrease are very important to you, but we also know that Ms. Al-Jabari, who is your team teacher, is you all are each other's right-hand person every single day, so we know that's a team effort, but congratulations to you on that announcement. And to each of your team members who have given us really hard but important feedback. And I want you to know how seriously we're taking that and how much we want to continue working with you hand in hand in what we'll be bringing to the board here in the next few weeks. And then lastly, I just want to say that we will be having school tomorrow. So sometimes we do work when and one of the things that was being discussed during this meeting was whether or not we were having school tomorrow. The roads appear to be good. We appear to be staying at a good temperature. We are not anticipating freezing of the roads, and so we will be starting school on time tomorrow, and we look forward to seeing everybody there. And that concludes my comments. I'm sorry. I know you're not going to be the only one who's going to feel that way, but it might be, perhaps in Owasso. I'm not sure. So that concludes my report, Madam President.
We have no non-routine items this evening. Is there any new business, Mr. Wade? Okay, well, I'll take a motion to adjourn because I have to go home and make lunches now since we're having school.
So moved.
Is there a second? I'll call for the vote. Ms. Fate?
Aye.
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 Aye.